story we've been following here on Credlin fairly closely is that surrounding the Gender Identity Development Service run by the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust in Britain. This centre deals with children with gender identity issues and is the only one of its kind in the United Kingdom. Now, I've been following the work of this centre for some time, and what really caught my attention recently were reports that since 2017, the centre has had a 400% uptake in referrals for gender concerns. Earlier this year, the centre was put under review for allegedly fast-tracking its younger patients on puberty-blocking drugs that could obviously have lasting effects on a child's growth and adult fertility. Numerous clinicians once working at the centre have quit, stating they felt under pressure to refer young people for immediate gender treatments, including these hormone blockers, without thorough assessment of their cases. One also saying that if you spoke out about any concerns you had, you were labelled transphobic. One prominent resignation was that of one of the governors of the Tavistock and Portman Trust, Mr Marcus Evans, who, after accusing management of having an overvalued belief in the expertise of its gender development service, left. Because so many of these same concerns are resonating here in Australia with similar debates right across state and federal governments, I wanted to discuss the Tavistock issues in more detail. I'm very grateful Marcus Evans, a psychotherapist, was able to join me live from the United Kingdom tonight. Mr Evans, thank you very much for your time. Really pleased that you can join us. This debate that you have had in Britain for some time is really just emerging here in Australia, particularly in relation to gender issues and young people. When you resigned in February this year, what was your reasoning?
Well, my reasoning was that I'd been a senior member of the Tavistock for 20 years. So I was part of the management, I was a senior lecturer and a clinician. And I took up an honorary role a year and a bit ago on the Tavistock Board of Governors, which oversees the way the Tavistock is being run. And at that time, two serious complaints came into the board. One was from a group of parents whose kids had been treated by the service, and they were saying they were worried that the kids were being sort of fast-tracked through for medical interventions. But of course, the Tavistock Centre's history is to do with psychological interventions. So they were very disappointed with the standard of investigation and sort of therapeutic engagement with their kids. The second was a previous governor and colleague of mine. He happens to be probably the best known clinician at the Tavistock, with a sort of worldwide reputation, Dave Bell, extremely ethical man, was contacted in his role of governor by staff who worked in the service, saying with similar concerns. They were worried that we were too quickly moving kids who were in a very distressed state, but moving them through to medical interventions without really understanding what was driving their belief that a change in their identity would improve their psychological state. Now, there's a bit more history to this, because as a member of the management of the Tavistock, I was aware that there was a similar report written some 12 years previously about the service, with similar concerns raised by staff within the service. So this is not a new thing. So all of these things chimed with me. Now, as a manager, I'm used to having complaints about the adult and adolescent services, the services I used to run, and one always takes the complaints seriously, because they give you a reflection of how your service comes across. You know, one sometimes feels that they're not always fair, but first of all, the person complaining is in a distressed state, so it's important to take that seriously. And the other thing is, it tells you something about the service. You've got to be broad-minded. what I felt was that in this instance, the Trust just wanted to close down any really serious examination of what was going on in what is a controversial service. And they also dealt with the two reports by basically saying Dave Bell didn't have the expertise. They then got the medical director to write a report. He has no expertise. There is no such thing as specialism in gender dysphoria. It's not a medical specialty.
Well, just on that point, let me just leap in there. On that point, here in Australia, there is a debate about guidelines being issued by clinicians to hospitals, children's hospitals around Australia, that basically demand that this is a protocol that everyone follows, that there's not much questioning of a child who might identify as, at a young age with another gender. And to my mind, there's not enough, I think, psychological assessments or time given for the child to reassess and think twice about whether this really is what they want, whether it's a passing phase, whether perhaps they're gay, not transgender, before the medical interventions and the drug interventions happen, because particularly fertility rates for women are affected dramatically by puberty blockers. The worry is intervening so young with children could, if they change their mind, set them up for some very difficult sort of circumstances in the future. I mean, how real is that debate in Britain? Because I noted in the reports that I read, anyone who spoke out was labelled transphobic.
Well, this is the problem, that in this area, which has become highly politicised, there is a closing down of debate and discussion. A bit, actually, you just have to argue with your previous speaker about the proroguing of parliaments to do with closing down a debate about what we're about to do. Anyway, that's not why you've got me on the programme. But it's very similar here, that with controversial treatments of vulnerable kids, with very little research about the effects of the hormone blockers, very little research about what happens to these kids once they set on this path. We hear that overwhelmingly, kids who start on hormone blockers, maybe at 14, go on to positive sex hormones, which are irreversible. So these are very serious decisions that we're making. I have to say I agree with you. See, in adolescence, you know, there's people are going through hormonal, sociological and psychological changes. And of course, that brings with it confusions and anxieties about, you know, the fact your body's developing, what society expects of you, etc. And people experiment with their identities, what sort of adult they're going to be. You know, people become experiment with being a bit feminine, a bit masculine, they become a punk rocker, they become a mod. This is normal, and we should in some way allow this to play its way out, as you're saying. Developing your identity and sexual role is something that takes place over time, and adults and mental health practitioners should be there to neither to butt heads, disagree with what the individual's wanting, nor to just fall in with it. It's a matter of saying, people are complicated. We've got all sorts of parts to ourselves, and usually narrowing something down to say, I've got a problem and this is the solution, is sort of unhelpful. It's what people do in disturbed states of mind. That usually,
I agree with you there, and dogma and labels also don't help at all, and shutting down debate with labels like transphobic is a real worry. I have to leave it there now, Marcus Evans. I really appreciate your time. As I said, this is a big debate happening in Australia, and I look at what's happening overseas, Britain in particular, for some guidance of how we might handle it here. But thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.